Have you ever heard the saying, be careful what you wish for? Well, in Benin City, they have a different warning, one whispered to young brides on the eve of their wedding. Be careful what you inherit. And this is the story of why. It's the chilling tale of Isi, the beautiful bride, and the coral beads that promised protection but delivered a curse. Everyone in Benin City had heard of Isi. Her name was on every lip, her beauty the subject of every song. She was the bride whose wedding was the talk of the entire street. She was tall, with skin like polished ebony, and a grace that made every movement seem like a dance. But what truly set her apart were her coral beads. They weren't just any beads. They were a fiery, brilliant red, so bright they seemed to hold the last rays of the setting sun. Her family, beaming with pride, her friends, buzzing with excitement, and her groom, Uyi, whose smile was as wide as the Benin River, all gathered for the celebration. Their wedding was a spectacle, something straight out of a Nollywood epic. Drummers played with a frenzy that made the very air vibrate. Guests, caught in the joyous madness, sprayed crisp Naira notes until the dance floor shimmered like a carpet of gold. And at the center of it all was Issei, adorned in her ancestral coral beads. They coiled around her neck in thick, heavy strands, cascaded down her arms as elegant bracelets, and wrapped around her waist, each piece a bold statement of heritage and power. These weren't just jewelry. Her mother had told her, with a solemn look in her eyes, that these very beads had protected their lineage for generations. They were a shield, a legacy, a living history passed down from her grandmother. And in that moment, seeing the pride on her family's faces, no one dared to question it. The day moved into the evening, and it was time for the traditional ceremony. The air grew thick with anticipation as the bride and groom knelt before the elders, their heads bowed in respect. Palm wine, milky and sweet, was poured and passed around in a calabash. Kola nuts, a symbol of life and hospitality, were broken and shared. Blessings, deep and ancient, were spoken over them, words meant to bind them together for eternity. Through it all, Isi looked absolutely stunning, a queen in her own right. But her smile, it was soft, beautiful, yet strangely distant, as if she were listening to a secret melody that only she could hear. As night fell, a joyful procession followed the newlyweds to the new house Uyi had prepared for them. It was a beautiful home, the rooms painted in bright, hopeful colors, the marital bed draped in lavish red and gold sheets, waiting to be blessed. Neighbors clapped and sang, their jokes and laughter echoing through the hallways. "Tonight, Uyi will not sleep early," one of them shouted, and the crowd roared with laughter. The happy couple, Uyi with his arm wrapped protectively around his bride, just laughed and waved as the front door closed, shutting out the world. That was the last time anyone saw Uyi. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The best man, Uyi's closest friend, came by to check on them, as is tradition. He knocked on the door, a playful grin on his face. No answer. He knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. A knot of unease began to form in his stomach. He waited a few more minutes. Then, with a growing sense of dread, he pushed the door open. The sight that greeted him froze the blood in his veins. There was Iso, sitting on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in her wedding attire. Her coral beads glistened faintly in the soft morning light filtering through the window. She was perfectly still, her posture regal. But the room felt cavernous, empty. Uyi was gone. His clothes were still folded neatly on a chair. His shoes were placed by the door where he'd left them. But there was not a single trace of the man himself. He had vanished into thin air. Panic erupted. The family was called, their morning joy turning into a nightmare. They screamed his name until their throats were raw. They searched every inch of the compound, overturned every piece of furniture, and even raced to the nearby riverbank, their minds racing with terrible possibilities. Maybe he had gone for a walk to clear his head. Maybe he stepped out for some fresh air. But they found nothing. He was simply gone. Through all the chaos, Isi sat there, a silent, beautiful statue. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. When her frantic mother finally grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her and pleading, "Ise, what happened? Where is your husband?" she replied with a chilling softness. "He's with me." "With you? Where?" they cried, their voices a mixture of confusion and terror. Isi didn't answer with words. She simply raised a hand and gently touched the heavy coral beads coiled around her neck. And then she whispered, her voice barely audible, "He is here." From that day, the story spread through Benin City like a Harmattan wildfire. It twisted and turned, growing more fantastical with each retelling. Some said the beads were enchanted, a relic from a time when her grandmother was a powerful priestess. They whispered that the jewelry carried an old, forgotten promise, a pact that no mortal man was meant to break. Others believed something far more terrifying, that the beads weren't just enchanted, they were alive. They were bound to Isa's spirit from the moment she was born, a living part of her, jealous and possessive. That night, desperate for answers, the elders gathered in the house to pray. As they chanted and poured libations, a faint voice echoed in the room, thin and distorted like a call from a great distance. It was Uyi's voice. It was gentle, but filled with an otherworldly sorrow. "Ise," it called, "I am here." As his voice faded, the coral beads on Isa's neck trembled violently. One of the beads broke loose from its string, clattering to the floor. For a single, terrifying moment, it glowed with a faint crimson light before the glow died, leaving it dull and lifeless. The elders, now terrified, tried to remove the remaining beads from her neck, but as they reached for them, they recoiled in pain. Each bead was scorching hot, searing their fingertips. At the sight of their fear, Ise finally broke. She began to cry, soft, desperate sobs. She swore she didn't mean for any of this to happen, that she was only wearing the gift her mother had given her, the legacy of her ancestors. But it was too late. By the next morning, she was gone too. The neighbors, drawn by the unsettling silence, found the room completely empty. All that remained was her wedding wrapper, neatly folded on the bed. And resting on top of it, coiled perfectly as if guarding a secret, were her coral beads. Not a single person dared to touch them. The elders, seeing no other choice, locked the room and sealed the house shut. Years passed, and the house fell into disrepair, but the story lived on. It became a cautionary tale, a legend whispered to young brides in Benin. Be careful of what you inherit, and be even more careful of what you wear close to your heart. But some nights, when the moon is full and hangs heavy in the sky, casting long shadows on that old, forgotten street, people say you can still see it. A faint red glow in the window of the abandoned house. It shimmers and pulses, like the shimmer of coral beads catching the light, waiting quietly for another groom who won't come back. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the heart of Benin folklore. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next tale. Stay curious and stay safe.